Hello friends, welcome back to Mains Answer Writing Basics program being conducted by Team India for IAS. This is Manjunath Mudod. In this video, we are continuing the UPSC Mains 2024 GS-1 paper question analysis and answer approach discuss. So this is the part 3 of the video. Earlier we have completed part 1 and part 2. In the part 1 we have discussed question number 1 to 5, and in the part 2 we have discussed question number 6 to 10. In this part 3 video we are going to discuss question number 11 to 15. This video analysis of the question and answer approach will help you to understand the demand of the UPSC questions, and it will help you to how to revise the content, how to frame the answer, what and all examples can be included in the answers. This video will not only help you in writing UPSC Mains 2025, it will also add value to upcoming KS Mains 2024 or 25. The topics that we are going to discuss, the questions that we are going to discuss, they are not only restricted to the UPSC Mains, they can also be, the same topic can also be asked in the upcoming UPSC Prelims 2025. So we should not consider that it is only mains perspective. So the broader objective is to understand the demand of the question and how to write the answer, what should be the content, what should be the examples, how to conclude, how to introduce. Apart from that, the topics, the concept that we are going to discuss in the answers, they have relevance in UPSC prelims also. So the same topics, the UPSC may ask questions on the same topics in the upcoming prelims. So in that perspective also this video is important. Coming to the question number 11, though great Cholas are no more yet, their name is still remembered with great pride because of their highest achievements in the domain of art and architecture. Comment. So the question is very lengthy, but the answer is very simple. They are asking the contributions of the Cholas in the domain of art and architecture. So this is a one part question. It is a straightforward. We have to write the contribution of Cholas in the field of art and architecture. It is a straightforward question, and the question is for 250 words, and the marks is 15 marks. Since it is for 15 marks, at least for art we should write 6 to 7 points, and architecture we should write another 6 to 7 points, one introduction and one conclusion. This amounts to some 14 to 16 points. So this is more than enough to get some average marks of say around 8 plus. Now let us move to the discussion of the answer. So we have to begin our answer by writing an introduction. So coming to introduction, what we can write. So the best introduction is to write about the period of Chola's administration in southern India, or Chola's rule or empire that existed between 9th century CE to 13th century CE. If we write this, then it will be a good introduction. No need to write some artistic or creative introduction. So coming to the main body or content of the answer. So first we will address the Chola's architecture. Within Chola's architecture, first we will talk about the Dravidian temple architecture. So the contribution of Cholas to the Dravidian style of temple architecture is immense. For this we can give the features or their contribution to the Dravidian style of architecture. So features like gopurams or gateway towers, vimanas or sanctum towers, or intricate carvings within the temples. So after writing this point, we should mention any one of the example of the Chola's temple. That for that we can write examples like Brihadeshwar temple, which is existed in Tanjavur. Then also we should explain in detail about the Brihadeshwar temple, which was constructed or built by Rajaraja I. So it is also known as Dig temple, and it has a massive vimana, and it has been one of the UNESCO World Heritage Site that we should write. Then we should talk about its tradition, like this temple is depicts the stories of Shaiva tradition and mythology, that we should write. Then we should talk about the construction material that has been used in building the Brihadeshwar temple. This adds value to our answer. We are not just writing some factual information. We are also adding value to our answer. This Brihadeshwar temple, it was built using granite, that we should mention. Then this temple, it stands as a testament to the engineering prowess and artistic vision of the Cholas that we should write. And also, we should not forget to mention that the temple was designed to be a self-sufficient. Self-sufficient means the temple sustenance had been done by giving the land grants to the temple archakas, that we should mention. So in the third part, we should talk about the Gangaikonda Cholampuram temple, which was built by Rajendra Chola I. So he was a son of the Rajaraja. It was another masterpiece of Chola architecture. It was built to commemorate his victory over the kingdoms along the Ganga river, that we should mention. Coming to the features of Gangaikonda Cholampuram temple, so it has been used. It has a soft contours and intricate sculptures, and it has more ornamental style. So this temple, it symbolizes the Chola's extensive empire and cultural influence. Then after that, we should talk about Airavateshwara temple, Darasuram. So coming to the features of this temple, it is known for its ornate stone carvings and sculptural detailing. The temple exhibits the Chola's mastery of artistic influence, that we should write. We should talk about its pillars, walls, and the sculpture that depict the various episodes of Hindu mythology, especially Chola's deep devotion to the Shaivism. So this is all about, if we write all these 4 points with the relevant value addition, so this constitute the Chola's contribution to the architecture. So after discussing about the architecture, we should also talk in briefly about this Chola sculpture and bronze art. The Cholas were famous for their sculpture and bronze art. So without mentioning this feature, our answer is incomplete. So coming to the sculpture and bronze art, the first point is they had a mastery in bronze sculpture. Example for this is a famous Shiva as a Nataraja, that is Shiva as a cosmic dancer. So these bronze sculptures, they are renowned for their elegance, grace, and realism, and it has been done using lost wax casting technique. So that we should mention. Then the second point is the realism and divine beauty of the Chola's bronze sculpture. The bronze sculptures, they stand out for their lifelike forms and ethereal expressions. The expressions were realistic, so these figures, they display a sense of dynamic movement combined with spiritual serenity, highlighting the artist's understanding of anatomy, proportion, and aesthetics. So we should mention these points or keywords. So now we will discuss the artistic and cultural patronage of the Cholas. So coming to the first point, patronage of arts and learning. That is, the Cholas were conquerors. They are not just conquerors; they are also patrons of literature, music, and the fine arts, which is depicted. So the Chola temples, they became the cultural hubs where the music, dance, and religious discourses were encouraged. So for example, we can mention the classical form of dance, Bharatanatyam, which was flourished during the Cholas period. Then the second point is religious and cultural integration. That is nothing but the Bhakti movement. So Cholas were devout of Shaivas, and it is reflected in their temples. However, they are also patrons of Vaishnavism and Buddhism. The Bhakti movement saints, they had a major influence on the Cholas administration, that can be witnessed in various compositions of the and literature of the Bhakti movement saints. These points are about artistic and cultural patronage of Cholas. Coming to the conclusion, in the conclusion, we should summarize the answer and we should talk about the Cholas' achievement in art and architecture and their contemporary events. We should talk about these art and architectural contemporary events on Indian society. The religious tolerance, the pluralism that Chola's administration has promoted to the different sects within Hinduism and to the different religions. So its contemporary events we should write in the conclusion. That means we should talk about the religious harmony, the temples that send message to the society. So this is all about answer approach to the question number 11. Now we will discuss question number 12 and its answer approach. The question number 12 is on world geography. How far is it correct to say that the First World War was fought essentially for the preservation of balance of power? So the question is asking about to analyze the reasons for the First World War, whether the First World War is it to preserve the balance of power that was existed in the world order, So here in this answer, we should talk about the causes of the First World War, and after causes, we should also mention or write about the specific incidents that reflect the balance of power struggle. Then we should also write about the results of the First World War and in achieving the balance of power. So these three dimensions we should write for this question, and for each of these dimensions at least we should write 3 to 4 points. As question is for 15 marks, so we should, if we are writing 3 to 4 points for each of the dimension, since there were 3 dimensions, we will be writing 9 to 12 points, then introduction, then conclusion. So it amounts to some 11 to 15 points. This is more than enough to get some 7 to 8 marks for this question. So we have to begin our answer by writing an introduction. So what we can write in the introduction? So we should talk about the period during which the World War happened and the nature of the First World War we should write. So the First World War, it happened between 1914 to 1918, is often seen as a conflict that erupted from a complex web of alliances, national ambitions, militarism, imperial competition, and nationalism. This is an apt and proper introduction for this question. So after writing introduction, we should write the concept of balance of power. So what was that balance of power? Balance of power between whom and whom? So we should talk about the balance of power refers to a situation in international relations where no single state or alliance is able to dominate the others. In the pre-World War I, what happened in the Europe, this concept was a cornerstone of diplomacy, particularly after the Congress of Vienna in 1815. So which aimed at to maintain the stability by preserving any one power, by preventing any one power like Napoleonic of France from achieving hegemony over Europe. It means no country in the Europe, no single country in the Europe that should achieve the full control over the Europe. So that was the intention of the balance of power. This balance of power concept came into existence in pre-World War I Europe after the Congress of Vienna 1815. Then what happened before the First World War? Before the First World War, in one decade before the First World War, the European powers they formed two alliances. One is Triple Entente. It has countries like France, Britain, and Russia. Another one is Triple Alliance. It has countries like Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. So these alliances were meant to counterbalance each other. They were meant to counterbalance each other, and they were fighting against each other in order to usher hegemony of their own alliances. But they also created an environment of suspicion and rivalry. Now we will talk about the causes of the First World War and the balance of power. So the first major cause for the First World War is the rise of Germany and a shift in the power dynamics. So the unification of Germany, it happened in the year 1871 under Otto von Bismarck, who drastically altered the balance of power in Europe. So Germany, it was rapidly industrialized after unification, and it also became one of the major military and economic force. This upset the established balance of power, which was dominated by the Britain, France, and Russia. Then the Germany's growing power and ambitions, particularly under the Kaiser William II, it created anxiety, it created tension among other European powers. So the Germans' desire for colonies and a stronger navy threatened the Britishers' supremacy. It also, while its support for Austria-Hungary in the Balkans, this also gave attention to the Russians. Then the second point is militarism and arms race. Before or pre-World War I period, it saw an intense militarization in Europe, where nations were rapidly expanding their armies and navies. Germany's attempt to build a fleet to rival Britain's naval dominance, also known as Anglo-German naval race. This directly impacted the balance of power. Then the third point is alliance system and entanglements. It means there were two alliances that arose, which we have discussed already. One is triple entity. It has France, Britain, and Russia. Another one is triple alliance. It has countries like Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. After writing causes for the First World War, we should also briefly mention the specific incidents which reflect there was a struggle for balance of power in Europe. So the first one is Franco-German rivalry. So in this Franco-German rivalry, what happened? France, it faced a humiliating defeat and it lost Alsace-Lorraine to Germany. So this made the France to take revenge on Germany and restore its position in Europe. The desire to reclaim Alsace-Lorraine was a critical issue for France and a major factor in its alliance with Russia and Britain. Then the second point is Balkan crisis. As there was a decline in the power of Ottoman Empire on Balkan region, both Austria-Hungary and Russia were fighting to expand their influence on Balkan region. So Austria-Hungary, it annexed the Bosnia and Herzegovina, and this angered Siberia, which is a Russian ally. So this set the stage for future conflict. In addition to this, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in the year 1914 by Serbian nationalists was an immediate cause for the war. The third point is British-German naval rivalry. So Britain was a dominant global power at that time and it had naval supremacy. At that time, what Germany was doing? Germany was challenging the naval supremacy of the Britain. This Anglo-German rivalry was a major pushing factor for the Britain to form an alliance with France and Russia so that it can contain Germany. It can prevent Germany from upsetting the balance of power that was there in the Europe. Now we should talk about the results of the First World War and the balance of power. So the first result is collapse of the empires. The First World War drastically altered the balance of power in Europe. The collapse of German, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman and Russian empires created a vacuum leading to the redrawing of borders and the creation of new states, particularly in Eastern Europe and Middle East. This pre-war balance of power, dominated by competing empires, was replaced by a new order which was fragile and unstable. So this new order, which was fragile and unstable, one of the reasons for the World War II. Then the second major result is Treaty of Versailles and new power dynamics. So this treaty, it aimed to punish Germany and prevent it from rising again as a major power in Europe. This treaty, it imposed heavy reparations and territorial losses and military restrictions on Germany. So these measures sowed the seeds of future instability and the rise of Nazism in Germany. So coming to the conclusion part, in the conclusion, we should assert the statement of the question, that is, it is correct to say that the First World War was fundamentally driven by concerns over the balance of power as European powers sought to preserve or challenge the existing world order. So this is all about major content and answer approach to the question. Now we will discuss question number 13. The question is, how far was the Industrial Revolution in England responsible for the decline of handcrafts and cottage industries in India? So it is for 250 words and 15 marks. The question is asking us to evaluate the industrial revolution that happened in England, whether it is responsible for the decline of handicrafts and cottage industries in India or not. So if so, to what extent? And if not, what are the other reasons for the decline of handicrafts and cottage industries in India? So we have to begin our answer by writing an introduction. So what can be the good introduction? So we should define industrial revolution and its features in a brief manner and in a summarized manner precisely. So that constitutes a proper introduction. So then what is industrial revolution? Industrial revolution in England. It happened in the periods of 18th century and 19th century, and it was a transformative event that altered the global economic landscape. It ushered an era of mechanized production, increased productivity, and the rise of the factory-based industries. So this is an introduction. Coming to the body part, after writing introduction, we should begin writing our answer So in the answer, first we should briefly explain the Indian handicrafts and cottage industry and how it was thriving before the Industrial Revolution in England. So India was renowned for its handicraft and cottage industries, particularly in the areas of textile, metalwork, and other artisanal products. And Indian goods were, especially cotton textiles, were highly valued in international markets. And India enjoyed a favorable balance of trade with many countries, including Britain. Coming to the key features of the Indian handicraft and cottage industry. So India had a skilled artisans who are producing high quality goods, and there was a strong demand for Indian textiles, especially muslin cloth, calicoes cloth, and silk clothes in the European and Southeast Asian markets. And India had a well established system of village based industries where the products were handmade using traditional methods. So this is the brief introduction or brief summarization of the Indian handicrafts and cottage industry before the Industrial Revolution in England. Now we should discuss the impact of the Industrial Revolution on Indian handcrafts and cottage industry. So the first one is introduction of machine made goods. So this machine made goods, that is mechanized way of production of textiles, particularly cotton goods, which drastically lowered the cost of production, and there was a growth of factories in Lancashire and Manchester which could produce more efficiently, which could produce textiles more efficiently at lower prices compared to the Indian handloom weavers. This significantly impacted the Indian handmade goods or handmade textiles. So this resulted in the decline in the import of Indian textiles in England. Then the second major point is unfavorable colonial trade policies. So the British colonial rulers, they implemented trade policies that favored the import of British goods into India while suppressing the Indian industries. The East India Company, which controls India's trade, imposed high tariffs and duties on Indian exports to Britain, making Indian goods more expensive in European markets. So what they did? So Britisher goods, they can be easily enter Indian markets, whereas the Indian goods, they imposed high tariffs on Indian goods, and they made Indian goods costlier in Britain. So because of that, what happened? Indian exports to British, they started to decline, whereas the British exports to India, it started to increase. And the British goods were allowed to enter India with duty free or at very low tariffs, which flooded the Indian market with cheap machine made products. So, this unequal trade structure led to the rapid displacement of Indian artisans and weavers who could not compete with the British factory made textiles. The third point is decline of Indian textile industry. One of the most significant impact of the industrial revolution was the on Indian textile industry. India's thriving handloom sector faced intense competition from British machine-made textiles. This resulted in the collapse of local weaving communities. Indian weavers, particularly in Bengal, they had been exporting fine cotton and silk textile to Europe, saw a sharp decline in orders, and many were forced to abandon their crafts or work for minimal wages or in low paying jobs. The muslin, the muslin industry of Bengal, known for its fine hand woven cloth, almost disappeared by mid 19th century. Then the fourth point is deindustrialization and economic drain. So the British economic policies during and after Industrial Revolution led to a process of deindustrialization in India. This means that the traditional manufacturing sectors in India, particularly the handicrafts, they were dismantled, and India was converted into an exporter of raw materials and an importer of finished British goods. This resulted to the economic drain from India, where the profits from the sale of Indian raw materials and the consumption of British goods primarily benefited the British industrials. This left India impoverished, and its industrial base was weakened. Now we will discuss the factors that exacerbated the decline of Indian industries. The first one is destruction of local markets. The British policies, they not only affected Indian exports but also destroyed the local market for Indian goods and services. With the influx of cheaper British goods, the Indian consumers turned away from traditional handicrafts and cottage industries. Then there was a loss of patronage from Indian rulers. So Indian rulers, they used to patronage Indian traditional handcrafts and cottage industries. But now the Indian rulers, they turned to the Britisher goods, and because of this, the traditional artisans and craftsmen, they lost the patronage. Then the second point is shift from manufacturing to agriculture. India was increasingly forced to become a supplier of raw materials for British industries, particularly cotton, indigo, and jute. So, because of this, many artisans and craftsmen, they were compelled to abandon their trade and take up agriculture or become the landless laborers. Then the third point is loss of technological innovation. India saw a transition from artisan based production industry towards the agricultural industry. This is because of the forced economic policies of the Britishers. This led to the loss of technological innovation in the field of industries, especially in the field of production of goods. So this further resulted in the decline of Indian industries. So after writing all those points, we should also mention the resistance and revival attempts of the Indian industries. So the first one is Swadeshi movement. We should highlight the importance of the Swadeshi movement with respect to the indigenous goods. Then we should briefly talk about the establishment of cottage industries and cooperatives after independence in order to promote the Indian handcrafts and cottage industries. Coming to the conclusion part, in the conclusion, we should summarize the impact of the industrial revolution on the Indian handicrafts and cottage industries. So, the introduction of cheap machine made British goods combined with the unfavorable colonial trade policies led to the collapse of India's traditional manufacturing base. This is about the answer approach to the question number 13. Now we will discuss question number 14 and its answer approach. So coming to the question number 14, the groundwater potential of Gangetic Valley is on a serious decline. How may it affect the food security of India? So the question has two parts. In the first part, the question is asking about the groundwater potential of the Gangetic Valley is on a decline. So for this we should write what is the status or status of the groundwater decline in Gangetic Valley. Then we should write the causes. This constitute the first part. In the second part, they are asking how may it affect the food security of India. So we should link the causes of the decline of the groundwater potential and its consequences on food security of India. So that is the second part. Since the question itself has two parts, we should write 7 to 8 points in the first part and another 6 to 7 points in the second part. So this constitutes around 13 to 15 points. Then introduction plus conclusion. So the question is for 250 words and it has a 15 marks. So for 15 marks, we should write at least 13 to 15 points so that we may easily score 7 to 8 marks. Coming to the answer approach, so we have to begin answer by writing an introduction. So in the introduction, either we will quote any data with respect to the decline of groundwater in Gangetic Valley, or else we will be writing the importance of Gangetic Valley while in ensuring the food security in India. So what is the importance of Gangetic Valley in ensuring the food security of India? These are two alternative forms of introduction. So we will go for the second one, that is we will highlight the importance of Gangetic Valley with respect to food security in India. So Gangetic Valley is one of the most fertile and agriculturally productive regions in India. It is often referred to as the country's food bowl. So after writing this introduction, we should draw Indian map and we should highlight the geographical extent of the Gangetic Valley. So coming to the main answer, we should first address the causes of groundwater decline in Gangetic Valley. So the first reason is over extraction for irrigation. So agriculture in Gangetic Plains, it relies heavily on groundwater irrigation, especially for water intensive crops like rice and sugarcane. So this unregulated withdrawal of groundwater, particularly through bore wells and tube wells, has led to excessive depletion of the groundwater. In Gangetic Valley, there was a shift from traditional crops to more water intensive crops. This further exacerbated the groundwater extraction. Then the second point is insufficient or inefficient irrigation practices. Farmers in the Gangetic Valley, they often rely on inefficient methods like flood irrigation. So the efficiency of the flood irrigation is hardly 20%. So this resulted in the significant wastage of water. So in order to address this, there needs to be a more efficient practices like drip irrigation and sprinkler irrigation, which was not widely adopted in the region, leading to unsustainable water usage. The third major cause is climate change and erratic monsoons. The Gangetic Valley, it receives majority of its rainfall from southwest monsoons, and this southwest monsoon is one of the recharger of the groundwater. However, due to climate change, there is an increasing trend of erratic monsoons. So this erratic monsoon, there is a delayed, deficient or excessive rainfall patterns which resulted in less effective groundwater recharge. So the droughts and rainfall variability have increased the reliance on groundwater further. So this further straining the groundwater aquifers in Gangetic Valley. Then the fourth point is urbanization and industrialization. The urbanization and industrialization in states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar have led to increased reliance on groundwater extraction for domestic and industrial purposes. This has reduced the availability of groundwater for agriculture, adding to the pressure on the already dwindling water resources. Then the fifth point is river water pollution and encroachment. The Ganga River and its tributaries are highly polluted because of the untreated sewage, industrial waste, and agricultural runoff. This polluted river system, it hinders the surface water use for irrigation, forcing farmers to further rely more on groundwater. The encroachment on wetlands and floodplains, which are natural recharges of the groundwater, further worsened the situation of the groundwater in Gangetic Valley. After discussing the causes for the groundwater decline, now we will discuss the effect of groundwater decline on food security in India. That is second part of the question. So the first effect is decline in agricultural productivity. So declining groundwater table means less water is available for irrigation, which is vital for the growth of crops. So in the absence of adequate water supply, the crop yields could sharply fall. So for example, water intensive crops like rice and sugarcane, which dominate the Gangetic Valley, they will be particularly affected and there will be a decline in the production of rice and sugarcane. Then the second point is increased vulnerability to drought. So due to climate change and erratic nature of the Indian monsoon and increasing trend of drought, if the groundwater is declining, so the decline in groundwater is further exacerbating the situation of the drought. So this leads to the decline in the fruit grain production, leading to the food insecurity in Gangetic Valley. So in the drought affected regions, they were more likely to face crop failures, leading to food shortages and rising prices. Third point is impact on wheat and rice production. So wheat and rice are staple crops in India, with the Gangetic Plains contributing significantly in the production of both wheat and rice. A decline in groundwater levels could lead to a reduced wheat and rice output, which is going to threaten national India's food security. So India is one of the largest producer of wheat and rice globally. Any significant decline in production could affect the global fruit prices as well. The fourth point is dependence on rain-fed agriculture. So if the groundwater levels, if it is declining, farmers may become increasingly dependent on the monsoon, which is unpredictable due to climate change. So the more reliance on rain-fed agriculture is riskier, and it leads to less productive than the irrigated agriculture, increasing the likelihood of crop failures and food shortages in the drought years. So this unpredictability will exacerbate the existing food insecurity, particularly in rural areas where people rely on subsistence farming. Then the fifth point is increased cost of food production. So as the groundwater becomes scarcer, farmers may have to dig deeper wells and install more powerful pumps to resort to costly alternatives such as importing water or relying on less labor surface water systems. So this would increase the overall cost of the food production, further pushing up the food prices and making food less affordable for the production. So the rise in the cost of irrigation could lead to the indebtedness among the farmers. So further it weakens the agriculture sector, jeopardizes the food security in India. So the sixth point is threat to livelihood and rural economy. As the cost of food production increases, farmers unable to produce more food crops, they will face threat to their agricultural livelihood. And because of this, what happens? Rural to urban migration increases, and there is a threat to the rural economy. Then the seventh point is impact on nutrition and health. The groundwater depletion reduces food production. This will in turn impact the availability and accessibility of nutrient foods like vegetables, pulses, and fruits. So, this in turn led to the nutritional deficiencies, rising malnutrition levels, particularly among vulnerable population like children and pregnant women. So, after addressing the impact of the decline in groundwater on food security, we should also talk about the measures to address the groundwater crisis in order to ensure food security in India. So, the first one is promoting efficient irrigation techniques. So, what are efficient irrigation techniques? Efficient irrigation techniques like drip irrigation and sprinkler irrigation. In addition to this, we should educate the farmers regarding government schemes like Pradhana Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. The second point is crop diversification and water management. We should encourage farmers to go for diversification in crops. Instead of going for water intensive crops, we should educate them and we should promote less water resistant and a drought resistance crop, less water intensive crops such as millets and pulses. This will help alleviate the pressure on groundwater. The third point is strengthening surface water infrastructure. So if we provide more surface water infrastructure, the farmers they rely on more surface water infrastructure like rainwater harvesting, then canal irrigation instead of going for groundwater extraction. So this will lead to the increase in the groundwater table. Then the fourth point is policy interventions and regulations. So policy intervention and regulations means so the government must regulate the groundwater extraction through appropriate policies that limits the excessive use and penalizes the over extraction of the groundwater. The implementation of water metering and water pricing for large scale agricultural use can discourage the unsustainable groundwater usage, and also strengthening the community-based water management systems where local stakeholders take responsibility for managing and conserving groundwater resources can lead to more sustainable water practices. Then the fifth point is climate change mitigation and adaptation. So one of the factors for declining groundwater is climate change. So to address this, we should adopt mitigation and adaptation strategies, so which will make the climate resilient agriculture practices. So these are the few measures to address the groundwater crisis and ensure food security. Coming to the conclusion, in conclusion, we should mentioned that ensuring the sustainable use of groundwater and implementing long-term solutions will be critical to maintaining India's agricultural productivity and food security. So this is about answer approach to the question number 14. Now we will discuss question number 15 and its answer approach. Coming to the question number 15. What are aurora australis and aurora borealis? How are they triggered? Around few months back, around 2 to 3 months before, the auroras australis and aurora borealis were in news, and also in Ladakh region of India, Indian scientists and researchers could witness the auroras. So because of that, the UPSC had asked a question on aurora australis and aurora borealis. So the question is both static and current affairs. Since it is in current affairs, it can be said if the question is from current affairs, or else this topic, both aurora australis and aurora borealis, it is clearly mentioned in the NCERTs. So the question has two parts. In the first part, we should briefly explain what are aurora australis and aurora borealis. So in the second part, we should write about how are these triggered. So the question is for 15 marks and word limit is 250 words. We have to begin our answer by writing an introduction. In the introduction, we will briefly mention about what are aurora australis and aurora borealis. So aurora australis, the southern lights, and aurora borealis, the northern lights, are mesmerizing natural light displays that occur in the polar regions of the earth. So here we have discussed one of the fact related to aurora australis and aurora borealis. So this constitutes an introduction. So now we will discuss the what are aurora borealis and aurora australis, the formation of aurora and the science behind it. Auroras occur due to complex interaction between solar winds, that is, streams of charged particles which are emitted from the sun, and the interaction between solar winds and the Earth's magnetic field and the atmosphere. So this interaction leads to the excitation of gas particles in the upper atmosphere, so which emit the light as they return to their normal state. So after exciting, so they emit the light while returning to their normal state. So this causes the formation of aurora. This is the science behind the formation of auroras. Now we will briefly discuss about aurora borealis. The aurora borealis are also called as northern lights. So coming to their location, aurora borealis occurs in the northern hemisphere, primarily near Arctic Circle, which includes regions like Alaska, Canada, Scandinavia, Greenland, and parts of northern Russia. So coming to the timing, so the aurora borealis, the best time to view aurora borealis is during winter months when the nights are longer and darker. The phenomenon is more likely to occur during periods of increased solar activity, like during solar storms. Coming to aurora australis, they are also called as southern lights. They occur in the location of southern hemisphere near Antarctic Circle. So aurora australis is visible from locations such as Antarctica, southern parts of Australia, New Zealand, and Chile. So coming to the best timing to view aurora australis is during winter months and periods of high solar activity. Now we will discuss the triggers for formation of auroras. The first one is solar winds and solar flares. So auroras are typically triggered by solar winds. These solar winds, they interact with the Earth's magnetic field. So when solar activity increases during the solar flare or coronal mass ejection, the number of charged particles released from the sun increases dramatically. This enhances the intensity of aurora display. The second point is magnetospheric substorms. So during magnetospheric substorms, large amounts of energy are transferred from solar wind into the Earth's magnetosphere. This leads to a buildup of energy and subsequent release of energy. So this causes the intense burst of aurora activity, creating bright and dynamic displays. Then the third point is geomagnetic storms. A geomagnetic storm occurs when the solar wind, particularly during the coronal mass ejection, disturbs the Earth's magnetosphere. During such storms, auroras can be observed at lower latitudes. Then the fourth trigger is solar cycles. The sun operates on an 11-year solar cycle during which solar activity waxes and wanes. It means solar activity increases and decreases. The frequency and intensity of auroras are higher during solar maximum when the sun's activity peaks, leading to more solar flares and more coronal mass ejection. So this leads to the more occurrence of aurora australis and aurora borealis. So these are the few trigger points for auroras. Also, we should briefly write about the effects of auroras. The first one is the auroras produce visual phenomena and attractive visual phenomena. And to witness this attractive visual phenomena, people travel to polar regions specifically to witness these aurora light displays. So this is leading to contributing to the tourism in places like Iceland, Norway, and Alaska. The second effect is impact on satellite communications. Impact on satellites and communications. During strong geomagnetic storms, auroras are accompanied by disturbances in magnetosphere that can disrupt satellite communications, GPS systems, and power grids. Then the third effect is scientific interest. So auroras, they also serve as an important subject for scientific research. So studying auroras provides insight into Earth's magnetic field and interaction between solar wind and planetary atmosphere and other space weather phenomena. So in the conclusion, we should write like beyond their attractiveness and beautiness, auroras provide valuable information about Earth's magnetic environment and the behavior of solar winds. However, they also pose challenges to modern infrastructure, particularly in terms of satellite communication and power systems. So this is all about answer approach to the question number 15. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. In the next video, we are going to discuss about answer approach to question number 16 to question number 20. Till then, happy learning.